tribes live and work today. We acknowledge the history of colonization, erasure, land theft, family separation, and genocide. We sit uncomfortably with these violent truths and this violent history so that we can move together with heart-centered wisdom to manifest a livable, just, and equitable future. Let us sit together with those truths and reflect. Millions are starving and fleeing the continuation of that violence today, and we must find the courage and set the intention to move from reflection into action. May all communities be sustained for the next 7 generations and beyond. Thank you for your time and attention this evening. Just some housekeeping items and a brief run of show before we begin. If you are hard of hearing or it would benefit you, please feel free to turn on your closed captions, which are accessible at the bottom of your screen between the Q&A and the raised hand feature at the bottom. You can also react. You can thumbs up or give a heart. That's available also at the bottom of your screen and can be used to show the speaker some love and support. And I'm going to tell you just a little bit about the panelists, and then we'll hear from those panelists. Those panelists include Tribal Chair Juan Mancias, Dr. Christopher Bas, and those folks will engage in a conversation with Dr. Jill Stein about the horrifying devastation of lands, waters, and culture being perpetuated by greed and hubris through LNG plants, SpaceX, the border wall, and ever more destructive violations of those lands and waters that are sacred to Estrukna. Then we will welcome you to participate in that discussion by submitting questions to the Q&A when the time comes. That Q&A feature is available at the bottom of your screen. Please silence your notifications. Give these esteemed panelists your full attention. Receive the wisdom that they are sharing tonight and support their efforts. Thank you. Juan Mancias, he's going to be joining us in just a few moments. Juan Mancias is Estrokna and chairman of the Carrizo Comecrudo tribal nation. The Honorable Chairman Mancias holds the degrees of Bachelor of Arts in Political Science and in Sociology, with minors in Economics and Business Finance from Texas Tech University. He also holds a certificate in Pastoral Counseling from Incarnate Word University. Chairman Mancias lives under the prime directives of Know Your People, Land Back, and Our People Will Not Die by Another. He speaks against and about the historic, ongoing tribal erasure and about real decolonization. He has previously worked for the Kickapoo Traditional Tribe of Texas, the Scotts Valley Band of Pomo Indians, and the Alabama Cashuta Tribe of Texas. Dr. Christopher Bas is Estrokna and the co-founder of the South Texas Environmental Justice Network. Dr. Basaldu holds a PhD in anthropology from the University of Arizona. As a tribal member, Dr. Basaldu struggles alongside tribal leadership to protect sacred sites and to restore lifeways and to promote environmental and social justice in South Texas. He lives in Brownsville. Dr. Jill Stein is a physician, longtime environmental health advocate, and organizer. As the Green Party presidential candidate in 2016 and 2012, she has long been fighting for a foreign policy based on diplomacy, international law, and human rights. She is now running as a Green Party candidate for president and is on track to put an impassioned pro-worker, anti-war, anti-genocide, climate emergency choice on the ballot for voters across Turtle Island. Please help me welcome these amazing guests and listen to the wisdom of this conversation. Christopher, if you'd like to start and provide us an overview of what's happening down in Brownsville, we'd appreciate that.
nenapale. Teapale menuazo mautapele. Lekayen glai yen helshat, yen ishtokna, yen somisek. Nenapale yen yepes. My name is Dr. Christopher Bas, and I currently live in Brownsville, Texas. And I am Ishtokna, and in our ancestral language, Ishtokna means human beings or human people, and we call our homelands Somisek. And of course, those lands are greater than just what's known as the Rio Grande Valley. What is Somisek is a large part of Texas and Tamaulipas, Nuevo León, Coahuila, and a little bit of Chihuahua on the other side of the river. What's known now as the Rio Grande, but that's the sacred spirit river for our ancestors and our people. And so the Eshtokna in these regions are the original people of the land. And down here, where Brownsville is located, if you're not too familiar with Texas geography, Brownsville is right on the river, and across the river is our sister city, Matamoros, Mexico. And then not too far to the east of Matamoros and Brownsville, is the Gulf of Mexico. And where the river gets to the Gulf of Mexico is known as Boca Chica, the little mouth, or the little mouth of the river, right? And so, Brownsville itself is a settler town, but it's on top of multiple ancestral villages of Eshtokna. And as you go towards the coast and closer towards the river, of course, that's where there are many ancient village sites and where people lived. Ancestral Eshtokna were born, and were buried when they passed on. And of course, placenta, after birth, the placenta and umbilical cords are buried in the ground. It's an old indigenous tribal custom. And that literally roots people into the ground. That is part of how Native people are one with their homelands. And so that's just a really brief background. And later, of course, Chairman Mancias can give you a much better overview of the history and the sanctity of the land. But what we wanted to do is make more people aware of some of the issues that are happening now. And of course, all of these issues are sort of the ongoing colonization of native land. And in this case, near the coast, or getting over towards the port of Brownsville, there are two large proposed methane fracked gas export terminals. One of them is known as the Rio Grande LNG project, and the other one is Texas LNG. And so if you guys don't know what fracked gas is, it's when gas companies are using the methods of hydraulic fracturing, they're like breaking up the rock, and they're poisoning and polluting fresh water in order to extract more oil, more gas. And then they want to ship that gas out to the global market. Well, a lot of that gas is getting mined out of the Permian Basin of Texas and New Mexico and the Eagle Ford Shale in Central Texas. And these companies have built pipelines, and they want to build more gas export terminals to get all of that gas out into the global gas market, the global fossil fuel market. And of course, these are private companies, so they're not going to share any of the profits, but they're willing to poison and destroy the environment, destroy the land, and endanger communities like ours down here in Brownsville, which is predominantly BIPOC, Mexican American identifying. 95% of the population is, they're communities of color. And also these counties down here, because of, generations of economic abandonment and systematic exploitation of land and labor, there's a lot of poverty, unfortunately. There are a lot of people that are struggling day to day, and we're considered a healthcare desert down here. So there's a lot of issues. And because we're right on the settler colonial border, there's been, especially since 9/11, there's been a ramp up in direct border militarization, the rapid expansion of law enforcement. And, that's made life difficult for a lot of normal, normal human beings. But anyway, but back to the LNG facilities. They're not built yet. And of course, there have been people down here trying to stop those from happening, including the tribe, because those projects are destroying sacred land of the tribe and sacred sites, ancestral sites. One in particular is known as Garcia Pasture, and that would be obliterated by the Texas LNG site. And the World Monument Fund named, through the work of Juan Mancias and Krista Mancias Zapata, they made sure that the World Monument Fund knew, and then they chose to recognize Garcia Pasture as an important cultural site that's most threatened or most endangered on their list back in 2021, I believe it was. 2022, I'm sorry. In the spring of 2022, Garcia Pasture was listed as one of the 25 most endangered, most important cultural sites. And the ironic thing is, if tribal members were to try to go onto the site, to visit the site, because law enforcement considers it to be the land of the Port of Brownsville, Port Authority land, we might get arrested for trespassing, even though it's not only one of our sacred sites, but it's even recognized as a sacred site on the National Register of Historic Places. So we're literally trying to save sacred sites from being destroyed by fossil fuel colonization, ongoing colonization in the form of fossil fuel businesses, oil and gas. And this area of the coast down here off Brownsville, Texas, we haven't been colonized yet by extreme petrochemical interests or extreme industrial interests. And so the coastline is enjoyable. It's cleaner than most of the Texas coast that's already been sacrificed to oil and gas. The seafood is edible because the waters are still clean enough for that. And we have a strong fishing industry. There's ecotourism possibilities here. This is one of the areas that people from all over the world come to bird watch. It's a great birding area. And there's a lot of biodiversity and unique ecological areas, especially between the river and the coast. And so there's so many beautiful things here that can lead to, well-being for the people here. But, the interests of a few very rich, very short-sighted people in the oil and gas industry just want to sacrifice this area too to the oil and gas industry, instead of, allowing the area to retain its natural beauty and its ecosystems. The Port of Brownsville, the Brownsville Ship Channel, and the Port of Brownsville around it are literally in between two national wildlife refuges, the Laguna Arasposa Wildlife Refuge and the Lower Rio Grande Wildlife Refuge. And so it just doesn't make a lot of sense to put these very polluting and destructive industries in between two wildlife refuges. The other thing about these gas facilities is that they would have associated gas pipelines in order to pipe the fracked methane down into these. And remember, these are only for export. Not a drop of that gas is going to be for domestic consumption. So yeah, these companies would have to also, in this case, Enbridge would want to build the Rio Bravo pipeline to bring all this gas down here. And Enbridge, of all pipeline companies, has some of the worst safety records, and it has a track record of committing extreme violence towards Native people as they stand up and resist these polluting industries. Another problem is the colonization of private space industry, private space tourism. So Elon Musk has been pushing his sort of pet toy project, SpaceX, here, and he's kind of ruined and destroyed coastal wetlands and really delicate habitat areas for endangered species. And he's built his SpaceX project like right on the beach, you know, the public beach that everybody should have access to. And what they do is they have agreements with elected officials to shut down the highway, Highway 4, which is the only access. It's a public road, public county road. And they shut it down whenever they feel they want to do their testing or when they feel they can shut it down. And, you know, they've shut down, over the years, they've shut down the road and access to Boca Chica Beach in exceedance of their agreements with Cameron County. And not only that, but SpaceX continues to want to expand. They want to get permits from Texas Commission of Environmental Quality in order to dump wastewater into South Bay at 200,000 gallons a day. You know, this is heavy industry. And when SpaceX originally tried to do its statement of environmental impact, it grossly underestimated their plans. And, you know, as soon as SpaceX got its foothold there in this beautiful area that's, you know, near National Wildlife Refuge and Boca Chica Beach State Park, he's just trying to take all of it. He's trying to take all of it piece by piece by piece. And that's also sacred land. It's land sacred to the tribe, and families, human beings have been going out to this very beautiful beach for thousands and thousands of years, whether it's to swim or to fish or to live or to pray. As long as human beings have been in habitation in this part of Turtle Island, in this case, Estokna, ever since human beings have been here, they've gone to the mouth of the river and to Boca Chica Beach. They've gone to that area to live, to be human, and to enjoy being alive. And I also want to say that these are some of the major threats that are happening, environmental and social threats. None of these companies and none of the federal regulatory agencies have consulted with the tribe. They've never consulted with the Carrizo Comecrudo tribal nation, the Estokna. So in my opinion, all of these projects are in violation of human rights. They're in violation of indigenous rights. There is no free, prior, and informed consent. And that makes all of these projects not only destructive, but they are immoral. And they are literally continuing the history of genocidal colonization through global capitalism. And that's as brief as I can say. But there are people here that are resisting. And, you know, alongside my colleagues and comrades down here, the South Texas Environmental Justice Network, and working with the tribe very, very closely and in allyship with the Carrizo Comecrudo tribal nation, we're resisting these projects and, you know, fighting for a better future here. So, Denapole, thank you for listening, and I can hand it over to Juan if he's ready to speak, and if not, I can say a little more.
Well, I'm sitting in the lobby right now, and it's kind of noisy. As soon as everybody leaves, I'll be able to explain more about what's going on. I'm trying to find a quiet place, and there's we've been the original people that inhabited the Rio Grande, and then Boca Chica was one of our big fishing areas and villages were all over the place there. And there's evidence to the place being pillaged and looted by non-natives who were there. One guy named a Surveyor, and how his house and his rooms in his house were filled with artifacts, and talks about how they found bones along when they were building the chip channel through there too. So I think we have to just be aware of, how the importance of it. The inhabitants of a place from first contact, which was in 1519, and then from that point to now, we've always been part of this area, and because this area is who we are. And Loma Alta is an archaeological site. There's been remains found all around that area in Matamoros, which is across the river. To us, there's no border because we used to go on both sides. We have family on both sides of that river, and it's really hard to give up our sovereignty on this side just because nobody wants to pay attention to it. They do the out of sight, out of mind kind of control over our people. And if they don't see us, we don't exist. And they keep saying that. So I told them, if they think they were extinct, they had another thing coming, because they could just kiss my ass and they can find the stink. And so I think it's important that we understand that for us, it's not a matter of protesting, but protecting that which we are, and that's the land. We are the land, and we are a big part of a larger place of well, if I'm a quiet place, larger place that we belong at, which goes up all the river, up and down the river. We're working on trying to. One of the things that sets it apart from anything else that's happened is that we set we put an injunction against Enbridge to try and stop the Rio Bravo pipeline that they're trying to bring in there too. But we're the original inhabitants, and there was a deed that we were able to locate that belonged to one of my relatives in Mancias, that used to own about 3,000 of these acres. And through some kind of real estate scam, they lost the land. And now we're buying it back. And so we have bought at least 23 acres right now. And but guess what? Enbridge is wanting to come through to 3 of those properties that we've bought. And we want to continue buying some of their land because they tried to condemn the land through the Texas General Land Office, which creates another situation with what's happening there. They sent me a letter that they wanted our consent to survey our lands. And I told them, I said, I don't understand what you mean by consent, because if you're going to extend it to something bigger than that, I prefer that it not be done. And we don't give any consent to anything. So they haven't gotten consent to do anything there. So, but now we're concerned about another pipeline that used to be called Jupiter Pipeline, and it's been bought out by some other investors, and they want to bring petroleum. This one is going to go also through this area and go under the ship channel, which is supposed to be dredged, which means sooner or later they're going to hit the pipeline of oil and make a mess out there. And people don't understand just the ramifications, how all of this is connected, and even the swapping of land between SpaceX and Texas Parks and Wildlife is suspicious to me, because the land they traded for is right along where those pipelines are supposed to go through. So, it's one of those situations that we don't have the capacity or the funding to be able to go out and continue putting the fight on. Unfortunately, we're very fortunate that we have some people that are willing to do this pro bono for us, and some of the NGOs like the Rainforest Action people have helped us to solidify our word about what's going on with this throughout the nation. And now I'm in Canada right now because the the global plastic treaty talks are starting, and I'm here because I've been part of this for now. This is the fifth, fourth, the fourth meeting of this, and we want to be able to make a big difference on telling them why the chemical industry is also affecting who we are, and that's what's happening with all along the Gulf Coast. And we would travel and on this A.E. Anderson surveyor that's supposed to be the godfather of archaeology or the grandfather of archaeology in Cameron County, who was only a surveyor. He was just a looter and a grave robber. He wasn't even an archaeologist, and they played him up like he surveyed the area very very well. But Garcia Pasture, we've done everything to keep them to delay them from building or constructing, and right now they're just doing site preparation. But they've destroyed, just almost 600 acres of black mangrove trees out there, and of course our sotol is that we brought in to be able to make our nets for fishing grow all along there now too. And all of those were taken out. We don't know what they did with them, if they just threw them and went and dumped them, or what they found. One of the last letters that I got from the Rio Grande was that they hadn't found anything. So my letter to them was it before or after you started the what they call site preparation. But we pretty much stood alone with just a few of us, like Becca Hinojosa and Josette and all these people that have been very conscious of the fact that they've destroyed a lot of history. And that's one of Texas's biggest things right now, is to eliminate as much history before 1836, I guess. And that's when the Alamo happened. But even then, the Alamo has a story too, because the Mexican president, Santana, was actually going to go and shut down all the plantations in Northeast Texas because they didn't have they were against slavery, so they were going on that. Sam Houston became a diversion and split the horses, and that was one of the big mistakes that happened. And so that should tell you how much of it has been based on just racism of wanting to maintain slavery and maintain its toward to being a plantation state, which still operates with that plantation mentality. And of course, fossil fuels has come in and started to legislate by corruption, because of course nobody thinks it's corrupt. Whoever's thinking that they're making the law, but and that's what's happening right now, is that they're looking at running a country of immigrants and keeping other immigrants in a separate situation as well, like the Stein, and keeping the immigrants in their place as well, with the wall that he's putting up and the razor wire that he's put in the river where it's hurt children. First, it started with the detention centers. With that, there's one right down the road from Laguna Tascosa, and so we're concerned about what's going on. It's all connected. They waived 28 laws. 26 of them are primarily they're all environmental laws, and water. I mean, they violated the Clean Water Act, the Clean Drinking Water Act, and they're even violating the water treaty with Mexico, and then they also waived the Graves Protection and Repatriation Act, NACPRA, and also the American Indian Religious Freedom Act, just so they could start up the wall. And this started with the Democrats, back in 2005, and that's how long we've been trying to maintain some sanity in what is going on, because a lot of the people are so intimidated and feel like, this is the American dream, but they don't realize that they can buy their houses and pay them off, but if you don't pay the taxes, they'll still take your house. So as you get older, the taxes keep going up, and it just creates a problem for the people that live there, and so they become sacrifices, and those that have get more, and those that don't have get less, and it continues, and that's the disparity in economics that happens there, because now it's even worse with SpaceX coming in with their new kind of apartheid, by buying land off and swapping land and trying to create another little town right at the place where it's sacred to us, because that's the mouth of the river is actually to us the big part of our creation story, and that's where first woman was given life when the Creator, they came down, they went up the river and put things together and took all the goodness of all the animals that they were creating going up the river, and coming back down the river, and then when he got to the river, took fresh water and salt water and put it with all those good things and created first woman. And with whatever's left over, he created man afterwards. But I have to tell you the whole story. But we have humor in who we are, and it kind of tells you that the woman is the bearer of life and the keeper of the culture in many ways, because the men had to protect what was there, and in reality, the women didn't have to depend on much, because there's a lot of good food that grows out there. So, those are things that we're told as we grow up, as I grew up. But it's part of the teachings of how to respect the essence of who we are. So it all boils down to one thing: it's fossil fuels. They're making the laws. I tell everybody now that we don't live in the United States of America. Or I used to tell them that we lived in the United States of Generica, but now I tell them that we live in the United States of fossil fuels. Because they're making the laws in Texas, and everywhere we turn around, for the first time, they had 764 laws that were passed, and this year, that was a record, and that's why we're looking, to protect our land. So this is not a political move. This is something that we've been doing for 500 years. For 500 years ago, when they showed up here, they invaded our lands and occupied it, and started getting rid of, the human being so they could get to the environment. And then to us, that's when it became environmental racism as well, because they were attacking the very things of who we are, our medicines, our plants that we were accustomed to. So those are things that we have to recognize. The fish, even the dolphin, is born of the tears of a first woman, because, and in 28 days she went through her menstrual time, and she started crying, and each tear that fell became the dolphins of the area. And there's dolphins on that channel, and nobody talks about them, but we do, because we understand that we're connected by that water, the salt water and the fresh water. And we talk about all the fish that are the yellow fish, the yellow catfish, and the redfish, and everything that people still fish out there, and that's going to be all contaminated with what they're doing, especially SpaceX, dumping their water. They're trying to keep their ground cool. One of the rocket ships that he blew up, when it took off, it killed a lot of nesting birds. You could see with the eggs of the birds, and he did it during the nesting season, which tells you that these people have no science whatsoever. They have ideals, but that's not a science when you don't do things accordingly to what's going on with the rest of nature and the rest of the animals. So that's when it becomes to environmental racism for me, because they're not respecting anything. And of course, if they don't respect the things that give us life, how are they going to respect the rest of us? And that's why they don't care who gets cancer. They don't care if you emphysema, COPD, and heart disease. So anyway, if you need any other questions, I'll be more than glad to answer them.
Kelly, you're muted, I think.
Yeah,
Great.
welcome you to add to this discussion now.
Was that directed to me, Kelly, or to?
Yeah.
Good.
Would you like to
Sure.
to
Yeah.
add, or
Yes,
we can start the Q&A either
I'll
way.
just make a brief comment, and and then I'd love to ask a question to Juan and get the discussion kicked off. But yeah, big thank you to both of you, Juan and Christopher, for your presentation, for sharing what your work is, and for doing your work. And it's pretty jaw-dropping to hear all these assaults that are kind of converging down there in what they want to turn into another sacrifice zone. Your little sacred zone, what you've been able to preserve and protect that is beautiful and biodiverse, and nature and sacred sites and historical sites and biodiversity of the area. How indigenous peoples have long been the caretakers of our natural world, and when fossil fuels or other forms of extraction and exploitation and capitalism in general, comes in, it's like, look out. So, your continued sovereignty, or restoring your sovereignty, shall we say, is so absolutely critical, and, makes the general principle of indigenous sovereignty and respect for treaties and just respect for the dignity and way of life of the indigenous tribes. We're so grateful for that. And I just want to make a very brief comment, for people who don't understand why this matters, or who don't respect human rights and indigenous sovereignty. It's always, I find, really important to let people know why they are in the crosshairs of all of this destruction as well. There's the general principle that, Native peoples are the guardians of these lands and these territories and the water and the air, and that allowing these vital resources to be exploited and just turned into profit is harmful and dangerous. And maybe the most specific warning is around what climate change means to everybody. And these LNG plants are extremely destructive to the climate. And the two plants that you talked about, the Rio Grande LNG plant and the Texas LNG plant, are 2 out of 22 new liquid natural gas export facilities that have been permitted in basically during the Biden administration. Maybe one or two may have started before then, but the bulk of this has been in the Biden administration. And in fact, the majority of them came after the blow up of the Nord Stream pipeline. And, that little convenient mishap, for which all indicators point back to the Biden administration, that we don't need to go into right now, but all the indicators do point, that conveniently opened up a huge market. So, voila, the Democratic Party and Joe Biden get to serve their corporate donors. They pretend to be the environmentalists, but in fact, these LNG plants are the single most, destructive thing that I am aware of. And in fact, according to the Sierra Club, these 22 LNG plants, of which you have 2 coming down, in Brownsville, they are the equivalent of building 440 new coal plants, And and this basically knocks all environmental progress back to the year 2005. So this is an incredible assault on the climate, and we are truly in a state of emergency on the climate. Not only that last year was the hottest year on record. Every month of this year has been the hottest month ever on record. We're in this accelerating phase. There are reports last week about temperature in the Antarctic spiking 70 degrees above normal, 70 degrees. And that was not an isolated event. This is part of a trend now. And there's been a massive increase in the melting in the Antarctic, which holds, by the way, the equivalent of over 200 feet of sea level rise. And while it used to be thought, oh no, it'll be at least 1,000 years, many thousands of years, that is now completely called into question. And there is really no scientific way to say how soon this is going to happen, but it's absolutely alarming. And there's one piece of it in particular in the Antarctic called the Thwaites Glacier, also known as the Doomsday Glacier. It holds 2 feet of sea level rise. It is undisputed that this glacier is losing its shelf. The shelf is where the ice sheet, which is sitting on top of rock, so it's out of the water. The shelf is where that ice sheet hits the water, and it's like a brake. It acts as a brake, stopping the flow of the ice sheet into the water. Because, if you put some ice into a cup of water, it's going to overflow. The level of water goes up even before the ice is melted. All you have to do is let it slide into the glass of water or the ocean. So there's 2 feet that could rapidly increase sea level rise. And it's debated whether this will be within a decade or two that we could see 2 feet of sea level rise, which is absolutely catastrophic. Goodbye, Manhattan. Goodbye, Florida. Coastlines all over the world, which is where 1/3 of the world population lives. There's that. And then it just so happens that the Thwaites Glacier is the backstop to another 10 feet of glaciers, which would elevate, sea level a total of 12 feet. So this is absolutely civilization ending. For most of civilization as we know it, things aren't going to work. And, and there will be just massive, unthinkable amounts of displacement. There were floods in Pakistan 2 or 3 years ago that flooded out, I think it was 40 million people. There's a lot of the world's population that is extremely vulnerable. And generally it is the communities of color, low income, poor communities who are most vulnerable here. So there's no doubt about kind of where the threats hit first, but at the end of the day, they hit everybody. So that's to underscore why keeping these fossil fuel plants, these LNG export plants out of Brownsville and out of indigenous territory, they must be stopped, and they must stop everywhere. And I just want to add that the president has the authority to declare an environmental emergency, a climate emergency. And the minute the president does that, that's the end of these liquid natural gas export facilities. They can be stopped with the emergency authority. All basically fossil fuel coastal destruction, anything that is damaging to the coasts and the oceans offshore of the US can be called to a halt. And according to the Center for Biodiversity, they maintain that all fossil fuel drilling comes to a halt as well, which makes sense because you can't have the pipelines and not have an outlet for them. So all of this can be shut down. All of it needs to be shut down. All of our lives depend on shutting this down, as well as, the people, of the Carrizo Comecrudo tribe who are on the front lines of this struggle. So that's just to affirm how we're all in this together, and our gratitude to you for, for your work and for really, leading the charge to protect Mother Earth and Mother Nature and the systems and the water and the air and the biodiversity that we all rely on urgently. So I won't say more because I'd like, to leave time for questions and discussion. So I don't know, rather than my asking a question, Kelly, because I feel like I've already occupied some space here. Do you want to take one of the questions from the chat that have been submitted for our speakers?
Julian V submitted a question. Greetings from San Antonio, Yanawana. Life is connected throughout Somisec and the bioregions of Texas and northern Mexico. Could you speak to the issue of migratory species that are being threatened not only by fossil fuel development, etc., but also by the border wall that cuts through sensitive ecosystems? Would like to take that question.
I'll defer to the local experts on this.
Can you say that one more time?
Sure. Could you speak to the issue of migratory species that are being threatened not only by fossil fuel development, but also by the border wall that cuts through sensitive ecosystems?
Well, one of the things that gets affected a lot is the not just the nesting, the ground nesting birds, but there's a plover that is affected by this, and then we have a lot of the butterflies that come through there too, and I mean sometimes there's countless of them because of the blooming of the huisache tree, and but then the ocelot is affected because of they're being almost sent around where when the rocket ships go off, and then blocked off by the fences that are coming in because of the LNG. And they haven't seen a bear there since 1969. The bears are slowly kind of moving in, but they're always trapped and then put back into Mexico. And even the ones that they see on I-10 are called Mexican bears. And I'm going like, hey, you guys checking their papers too? And so it's one of those things that we have to always, kind of let them know how stupid they are with what they're doing. A lot of times they have no idea because they don't see themselves as well as being part of an immigrant nation, and that their forefathers that were immigrants who were very abusive and oppressive. And I think that we need to make sure that they understand this as often as possible. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, would anybody else, Christopher, would you like to add anything to that?
Yeah, I want to add a little bit because it's something I've thought about for a long time and observed. Uh, of course, with the ongoing border militarization, and again, the river was never a border for our ancestors. The river is the source of drinking water. It's literally the source of life, but it's not just the source of life for human beings. It's the source of life for plant and animals and other species. And so if we're thinking about so-called, migratory species or other animals, they have every right to exist and every right to move and roam across their land, their ancestral land. We share all of these lands and resources with our animal relatives, our plant and animal relatives. And so, one of the big examples of that is like the monarch butterfly. Well, I don't think in the consciousness of a monarch butterfly that they think of themselves as migrating and crossing borders, because those borders are human constructed. They're literally just living their life on their land, and their life includes travel and movement. And that's kind of how I see all these other species as well. And it's not just the violence of the border wall and the razor wire and militarization with weapons and surveillance and so-called tech systems and tech solutions. It's literally it's a level of human arrogance that is expanded in colonialism that thinks that it has the right to control all life, not just human life, but that it has the right. It's so wrong-headed. It's an evil mentality to control all life.
I think, and I think also that there's got to be some kind of a understanding of what a lot of these things that are happening, because there's a kind of an absolution that occurs they absolve themselves of any wrongdoing, and a lot of it has to do with the doctrine of discovery and how if the people were different than them and the place was different than what they knew, they had to like Christianize it, which is part of the colonization, and it brings a whole brand new perspective to who we are, because what everybody thinks that's so much of the native people are so spiritual with the land, it was a common life way that we lived. We were part of that land, and we knew that because we had to maintain that connection that is always forgotten. And I think that that's one of the things that we have to do, is that how can they forgive themselves for the crimes that they do? That's like you can see that happening with Trump now. And I'm sorry, I had to say that, but you can see it, that mentality of I didn't do it, but yet the people that do this promote the the society that does it, and they're part of it, and they still say, well, I wasn't there, I didn't do it, I didn't do that to your people. But they say the forefathers, my forefathers were being killed so they could write a constitution. Did you know that the Mankato incident that happened in 1863, that Lincoln signed the murdering of 42 native Dakota Indians in Mankato, Minnesota, and 2 weeks later he signed the Proclamation of Emancipation. So I don't see how they can make this man even look like he was a very brilliant man when this was happening, because at, at, at the rate of freeing one people, they're killing another. And that's why we, in that prime directive, we're not going to let our people die. My great-great-grandfather said in an interview when they're trying to pass the railroads through Texas and at the Devil's River, they interviewed him, and he asked the guy that's in charge, his name was Hawkins, and said, "What are you going to do with my people now?" And and Captain Hawkins said, "Well, we're going to have to move them so we can pass a railroad through here." And he said, "Now my people will die by another." So every time you uncover a grave, every time you steal and you grave rob or you loot anything without the permission of the people of the land, that's not land acknowledgement to me. That means that, you know, one thing is not really in contact, not connected to the other, and we had to find ways to be able to say, when do we learn to respect for the people that were treated so hard? And I see this whole fossil fuel industry, what they're doing, as the next smallpox blankets that were handed out to us, and that's just cruel that they don't care and they absolve themselves and they just want more money and they go look for more money. So where do we hit them? We hit them where it hurts them the most, in their pocketbooks.
Thank you so much. We do have another couple of questions. Jill, did you want to respond in any way, or should we move on? You're muted.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Juan. You know, that reminder that, you know, genocide is a clear and present danger, you know, and a fundamental aspect of, you know, colonialism and the founding of this country and the continued, you know, administration of this country. That there's still a slow motion genocide going on, you know, towards Indigenous peoples in this country and around the world. And looking at the two kaffias in the galley here, I wondered if either of you, Christopher or Juan, wanted to just share any thoughts about, you know, connection with the struggle against genocide in Gaza, with the ongoing struggle against genocide here in this country for Indigenous peoples. Just wondered if you know, wanted to say anything about, you know, why you're wearing that keffiyeh here with us tonight, Christopher, and so on.
Thank you. I'm wearing the keffiyeh in solidarity with Palestinian people, because Palestinian people are currently living under a brutal occupation that refuses to see their humanity. And there's a settler colonial project, an occupation that is destroying not only Palestinian people, but destroying the land, destroying olive trees, destroying wells of water in arid places. So settler colonialism is environmentally destructive always, as well as being culturally destructive as it tries to destroy the people of the land. And I think a lot of Native people are very sensitive to those types of issues, because Native people are continuing to resist settler colonialism and the histories of genocide. Settler colonialism is a logic of genocide. And so, you know, knowing that right now that there is an active genocide going on in Gaza, and a threatened genocide in the occupied West Bank and in occupied East Jerusalem, I want to stand in solidarity. And you know, if I had the power to make all of those bombs stop, I wish I would. If I had a power to open up those artificial boundaries and let the food and aid flow into Gaza, I would. I wish I could. And you know, the least I can do is show that I support Palestine and Gaza, and by wearing the keffiyeh.
Thank you so much for that. Juan, do you have anything you want to add to that, or should we throw one more question at you? Because I do have another one I want to put out there.
Well, for me, it's been trying to support the Palestinian territory for a long time because of the issues that happens with us too. And again, we're looking at a land of immigrants, setting policy for other immigrants with the wall and everything that's going on here. It's been going on since 2005. And they've been suffering. Well, everybody thinks 2005 was Clinton, but it was way before that too. I mean, otherwise we wouldn't have, Border Patrol or even the Patriot Act. That is really the problem that we're having here with this whole issue. So yeah, I've always talked about it in the past, always, because I think it's important for people to realize that, that those religions can be very oppressive sometimes, just like they were to us here. I think the worst kind of colonization we got was the missionization. And because a lot of people lost their teachings and their traditions in that manner. Those of us who remained in the wild and became only the people that would follow the trails and were hired by the ranchers who were stealing the land. They knew that we knew where these places were, these holy places. And there's more than just one holy water hole, in Texas. And there's many. I can show you some beautiful places where there's only a certain kind of flower that grows at that watering hole. Up in the middle of the canyons where it's supposed to be dry, but there's a spring that's there. But they never tell you about that. They don't tell you about the picture that shows the missions up in Coast Texas, where these are drawings of my people, and we can interpret it with our language, and so this is part of understanding the connections that we've had all along in these places, because we were migratory and we traded, and we never overcropped or abused the land that we were going to be on.
Thank you.
Yep. We have time for one more question. Should we go to that question now, Jill?
Yeah, if I could. I want to acknowledge that there are some wonderful people here who are part of this webinar, who are involved in challenging power in the state of Texas and in the area of Brownsville, and related to this private commission where these LNG plants are being built. And I know that there are some candidates, and I want to name in particular Eddie Espinoza, who is running for railroad commissioner as a Green. And, railroad commissioner in Texas basically oversees, as I understand it, all the fossil fuel development. And I would love to hear any thoughts that you have, either Juan or Christopher or both of you, about what could be done if we had real human beings who were serving, in these offices, if we had some elected Greens, frankly, because Greens are not serving, fossil fuel and corporate masters. We're serving everyday people and marginalized people and communities in particular. So if we had an Eddie Espinoza as railroad commissioner in Texas, or I think there are several others among the Texas Greens who are running for the commission, the city commission that would be overseeing, the areas in which these LNG plants are being built. Do you think about what you would like to see people doing in positions of power so that they're actually representing, the interests of the tribes, marginalized people, ordinary human beings who need clean air and water and, want to protect nature and biodiversity? Do you have any thoughts about what you'd like to see office holders doing? what you would ask of them, for example? Is there permitting?
Well,
Go ahead.
for me, you can go after me if you want, Christopher, but for me, it's just the fact that we got to quit, we got to stop the colonization of segmentation, and that's and look at the people as human beings, and those that are going to treat us like human beings, and people that understand the health crisis that we have in this country, especially among, you said there was 500 tribes, 500 tribes that are recognized, but there's like 276, and maybe even more now that they've applied for federal recognition, and they're not being heard either. And I think it's important that people realize the fact that we are human beings and we're the original human beings of this area. And humanity has a lot to do with trying to make sense of what's going on. And I think that's a big part of this. And I think it's, to me, just being a human being is important, because the other two parties, I don't know, I'm having a hard time for me to understand their consistency of not being human anymore.
Yeah.
Because they want to forgive their crimes, and if it was any of us people of color, or any of us Native people, look at my relative Leonard Peltier, who's still in jail for something that he was framed for, and nobody's done anything about it,
Right.
and basically because we don't know, we're the bad people, but we didn't invade this land. We're not the terrorists. They are. They're the ones killing and abusing our kids in residence schools, in the mission schools, and even in the boarding schools. And we have to be able to recognize and call that out by changing the narrative. When they ask about critical infrastructures, that they passed a no protest law in Texas on critical infrastructures, and their infrastructure is more important than the air, the water, and the land, which is truly the critical infrastructure and the human beings of the land. And they're not looking at that as critical infrastructure. They're only looking at their building stuff so they can get more money. And these bankers, they need to start understanding that they're part of that. They're accomplices to those crimes.
Great. Thank you so much. Kelly, are we able to bring Eddie on for a moment? Is there a way we can give him a turn on his
Chris,
camera and his
turn on his audio.
microphone?
Can turn on his camera, I don't believe,
Okay,
but we can turn on his
we can get his audio. Great. Welcome, Eddie.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Oh, well, greetings everyone, and wow, thanks for the nice webinar. We know exactly what needs to be done. There's no ambiguity to this. I'm a kinder teacher. I was in the classroom for 26 years. And this is not my area expertise, but once you do a little research on it, you start understanding that, hey, this is a global problem. It's happening all over the globe. Now, if I'm of the opinion that if Texas does not spark a green revolution, then I don't think it's going to come from anywhere else. I mean, we know exactly what we need to do. We need to plug, clean, and decommission the wells that are polluting, our groundwater. We need to ban fracking. We need to stop the expansion of new fossil fuel infrastructure. And also, one of the big things that I've been pushing for is that we need to let the oil and gas industry know that they are the experts in cleaning this. They created the mess. They're going to be exposed to these dangerous chemicals. So the fossil fuel industry, we want to help them transition into plugging and cleaning and getting us to decarbonize the economy. We're not here to attack anybody. We're here to solve problems, because the problem with Texas groundwater, if we really understood how bad it was, we would be afraid. Very, very afraid. And contaminating groundwater in the middle of a drought is not a good idea. So, we want to help Texas finish the job and decarbonize the economy. It's very simple. And a lot of the reforms that we want to implement with the Texas Railroad Commission, the work's already been done. The work's been done by Commission Shift out of Laredo. All we need to do is win the election and then implement these reforms into the Railroad Commission so we can start tackling the job that needs to be done, which is to protect our groundwater and our Texas ecosystems. Now, the Republicans are drill, drill, drill. The Democrats are drill, 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 export. This is not a Republican, or it's the corporate party. They're two sides of the same coin. And the only option that Texas has to help Texas families with this groundwater situation is the Green Party. We're only running two statewide candidates, one for president and one for Texas Railroad Commission. So we desperately need, actually, the world needs these two positions. Dr. Stein as president and myself as a Texas Railroad Commission. We know what needs to be done. We just need to go run a great campaign, win these seats, and let's start handling our business as far as taking care of the environment. Because I've been on the planet 54 years. That's 54 years of fresh water. That's 54 years of food. That's 54 years of clean air. That's 54 years of decent temperature here in Texas. And hey, if the older generation has that, then gosh darn it, the younger generation deserves it too. And no one, and I mean no one, is looking out for the little ones. And that's, 26 years in the classroom working with little humans, and nobody's looking out for them. You have them in the classroom taking tests because it's a corporate world, so they have to take these STAR tests. There's reforms that need to take place everywhere, but the big one is groundwater and ecosystems. Thank you. And everybody have a great weekend. Oh, and if there's any questions, I'd be more than I'd be willing to answer any questions that you all have. No, actually, I was an elementary teacher for 26 years, not high school, but I'm able to work with pre-K 3-year-olds all the way to 12.
Awesome.
Oh, and one more thing. It's a bit of something that's a bit frustrating is, when you go into the classroom, they tell you attack illiteracy, develop the basic reading and the basic math skills, attack. Here, it's frustrating because we got to wait till January to implement these policies. And boy, that's 8 months that we're losing, and that's 8 months that we don't have. But, well, it is what it is. And thank you very much. And now if you have any questions, I'll be more than glad to answer.
If people do have questions for Eddie, if you could put them into the chat, let's take them from there, just because we're short on time. And I do want to be sure that Juan and Christopher have a final moment to share any closing thoughts with us. And then Kelly, you may want to make a final announcement too, but either Juan or Christopher, do you have any remarks you'd like to share with us as we close out?
Yeah, I'll let Juan have the last word. I just want to say thank you, everybody, for being here and for listening. And again, the Carrizo Comecrudo tribal nation is fighting for their land, their sacred land, and their sacred sites. And the South Texas Environmental Justice Network is a group of people here down in Brownsville who are fighting these environmental fights, but from a perspective of environmental justice, social justice, and also supporting Native people and tribal sovereignty. And so, yeah, I'll let Juan have the last word.
Thank you.
Well, one of the things is that, we have bought land and we're buying more land up and down the rivers, basically because that we identify it as our land. And we know because of the language that was used along the way, and because of the art and the paintings that were left along the way, all through the middle of Texas, any river bluff that has it. I know a lot of people want to romanticize it, but it's not about being romantic, because these are the people that were struggling and running at some point from what was going on with the genocide of what Texas is about. And we can see the abuse and the inconsistencies of inhumanity um, uh, by the governor of Texas, and it's you know, even them thinking that they have a stronger view about what the people need, and it's not they're not doing their job because they're just going where the money's at, and that's what it's always been, and that's why we're having such a hard time in Texas because they don't even want. One time they were trying to bring the Indian Commission Board back, and nobody would in Texas, and there's no Indian Commission in Texas, so it's really difficult to deal with what is happening even down sorry, Sierra Blanca with the Saguaro pipeline, and how they have also given a free ride the Railroad Commission and everybody else the FERC on what's going on. And the thing is, you got to stop absolving themselves from any wrongdoing. These are crimes, and people are dying, and people are dying at their facilities. People are getting hurt at their facilities, and we still don't have a good health plan whatsoever for any of the human beings of this land, and especially when it comes to us as Native people. So yes, it's environment racism based on a consistency of socialization of them being racist and wanting to maintain control of somebody that doesn't look like them. And that's what the Doctrine of Discovery is all about. Some of the laws are based on that, and they continue to do that. So, any help that people can come and help us, clean up. And Farmer Dave is going to help us try to build some of these cypresses back and bring back our cocoa and whatever else we can get. But we gotta demand it from the county commissioners as well to start giving us easements to our lands, because right now they're all in less than a week they agreed for the land swapping when they were against it before. So it's kind of crazy what they're doing. Something's happening. Thank you very much. I just want to say Nenapele, Nenawago, and I just I'm going to say good night to Lolo. And I was in an accident earlier today, so I'm still kind of hurting a little bit. We got rear-ended in Ottawa. Right?
Terrible.
So I just Christopher got some of the places you can contact us at. You can go on my Facebook and you can read all my Juanisms. All my Juanisms are on my Facebook. I call them Juanisms. It's because I see things from a Native perspective, because I want to change the narrative. This Orwellian mentality has got to stop.
Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you so very much for your insights and for taking the time tonight to just help us understand what's going down in the southernmost tip of the country that just kind of escapes our notice and is kind of going on quietly. The atrocities that are being inflicted on the Native people of this land who are safeguarding these last vestiges of our precious Mother Earth and Mother Nature. So thank you so much for sharing this, and we'll be looking for opportunities to work together. We hope to get down to visit you, to help support your struggle there, to help support the local candidates so they can fight this battle in the halls of power, and just support in general the work that you're doing. Kelly, any closing remarks? I'll turn it over to you.
Let me just say one thing. We are working on starting our first university, Native American University,
Okay.
which is not a land grant college, and it'll be an immersion one. So if
Wow.
anybody wants to do, what do you call it, homeschooling, they can come and live out there for a while. And
Wonderful.
we'll do it in our language.
I
Wonderful.
just wanted to say thank you so much to everybody who participated on this call, whether as panelists or as attendees listening and receiving this knowledge and thinking about how you can take action and help with these issues. I know that we have a number of candidates who were in the audience tonight, and to that end, we are going to have a candidate forum coming up at the end of May. That's tentatively scheduled for May 29th at 8 p.m. Because we have amazing candidates who are working to mobilize at all levels of government, whether it's water or school board or the railroad or for Congress or for president. We want to elevate those struggles and those issues and the people who are moving that work forward. So it's an honor to be with you all tonight. It's an honor to share this community with you, and very warmly thank you very much. Have a good night.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Kelly.